To Deputy Superintendent Keith Oswald, Glenda Sheffield, Dr. Pete Licata, and Dr. Geraldine Johnson, Dr. Sheffield, excuse me, to go through the Worst Choice Workshop.
And good afternoon, board members. You have requested a kind of a more in-depth workshop on choice programs. And at this time, I'm going to turn over to Chief Academic Officer Sheffield to get us started.
Good afternoon, board members, and Dr. Fenoy. The Department of Choice and Career Option, we're definitely excited to present its annual program updates. Within this presentation, Dr. Licata and Dr. Johnson, they will be sharing many of the systems and processes that guides the mission and vision within the department in maximizing the opportunities for our student learners and their families. So we're definitely excited about sharing with you the state of the Department of Choice and Options at this time as we continue again to maximize the potential opportunities for our student learners and in closing the gaps, because of course we do realize that there are gaps that needs to continue to be closed.
So with that, just want to, as we go through this process, and we're going to go through it very fast, a couple things to keep in mind. We still are looked upon nationally as one of the leaders, and people know that. Some of the things we're really proud of are demographics and the students that attend, and they mirror our and you'll see that in but also, you see us a lot with this, but there's a group of people, and I want them to stand up right now, that are the Choice Department, that please stand up, folks. And it's not that big, and they do an amazing amount of support to our schools, and they deserve a lot of the credit for what goes on. They are the workhorses, and they make us look great as a district, so they do deserve a lot of respect and congratulations. Thank you, folks, and they're here to say. But right now, I really want to turn this over to Dr. Johnson. She is the director of this department, and she has been leading the ship very well, and nothing but great things to say about her. And she's going to do this in 15 minutes. I guarantee it.
Turn on the timer.
She'll have a bruise here by the end of the night.
So I'm going to skip over.
Turn the clock on back there, please.
some of the pleasantries. I think you guys all know what our mission is. We really are about making sure that we offer families choices, and that families are as informed about the many choices that are offered throughout our district, so that they can make the best choice for their students. Our mission is right in line with the strategic plan for the school district and the long-term goals. As you can see, we are in line with every single long-term goal, whether it's increasing third grade reading all the way to making sure our students are successful as they exit and graduate from us. So who are we as a department? We are a small department, as you can see, but we're mighty, and we cover a variety of different functions. Some of the most popular processes that you guys are probably more familiar with are the choice lottery process that we take students through, the control open enrollment process, reassignments. We also handle opportunity scholarships, and just this past year we were blessed with the Hope Scholarship and assisting with that. We put two little buses here so that the question always comes up, well, what programs allow for transportation? So we wanted to make sure that we included that. So the two choice processes where students get transportation are when students get assigned to a choice program through the lottery, as well as opportunity scholarship. So what guides what we do? We have a policy, and that policy is 5.016. We brought that policy to the board last year because we actually updated that policy. The 4 bullet points that you see here were the major updates to that policy that we made, adding some information in here regarding duplicate program exemption, addressing the appeal process for students when they are exited from our programs, giving families the opportunity to appeal those decisions, and doing some major updating to some of our forms that our principals complete as they request these programs because they were a little bit outdated. Part of our policy is our procedures manual, which outlines also the entry requirements, or sometimes we may refer to them as eligibility criteria. So one of the things that we were asked to kind of take a deeper dive in is to kind of look at what other districts like us require their students to have for entry. And so as you can see, we do require GPAs, we require auditions for our programs for performing and fine arts, but you'll see two very faint check marks next to FSA and prerequisite courses, and those check marks are faint because even though we do have some programs that require them, they are not across the board. So when it comes to FSA scores, we only have one program that requires FSA scores, and those are our biomedical science academies that we have the collaboration with FAU College of Medicine. And for the prerequisite courses, we do have a couple of high school programs that require some prerequisite courses. Those are in computer science, like our MSc program at Suncoast and so forth. Some of our programs do require a background check, if you will, like our medical academies, because we have our students going out into hospitals and doctors' offices, so those require that the students have clinical or fingerprinting and background checks. How do we know if we're being successful? So one of the things that we follow, and we show this, we're showing it in a different form this year than we normally do, but you can see the growth over a period of time in terms of the numbers of choice programs that we have brought on board. We also take a look at, well, what programs do students tend to be more interested in? And so this slide shows across the board, K through 12, the top 5 programs. So our medical programs, our STEM programs, STEAM, IB, Montessori, and high technology tend to be the popular programs across the board. But when we break that down by level, in the elementary level, it's our STEAM programs, Montessori, IB, the visual arts, performing arts, and our International Spanish Academy. At the middle school, we take a look at pre-med, high-tech, our pre-engineering, and our pre-culinary. And in high school, pre-med, IB, engineering, culinary, and our innovative interactive technology program at Suncoast. The color chunks in the bar represent demographics, so you can see in some of our programs there's kind of an equal amount of number of students, and these are all based on the number of applications that were received for these programs. I also want to point out that the popular programs also represent the sectors that our business and industry folks are telling us that we need to have people in. So it's good to see that our students are actually applying for those programs that match the need of our local industries. When we take a look at our 18-19 data in terms of who applied and who was assigned, we can see here that we had 21,665 students who applied, and of those, 14,709 students were assigned. And you can see here based on demographics. The two areas that we continue to work on in terms of just getting students to actually apply happens to be definitely in our ELL population and our ESC students. So to that regard, we've been really focusing on our recruitment efforts, trying to raise awareness and garner the support for these populations. And so one of the things that we're really proud of, they're not here today because they're teachers and they're off, but we're really fortunate to have 2 resource teachers in our office who are out in the communities. They are wherever we need them to be. So you'll see on the next slide here, they're at laundromats, they're in the churches, they're wherever our families are that need the assistance. One of the things, and this was a recommendation, we presented recently twice to the Diversity and Equity Committee, and they gave us some phenomenal feedback. And so we're incorporating some of the ideas and discussions we've had with that committee. So we're going to be adding some pages to our choice booklet with a QR code that someone can scan with their phone, and they will have a video that will play in their language. Because even though we may translate our book in different languages, some people don't read their language. So if they can click on that QR code and see a video in that language, hopefully that will help with getting the information out. So when we provide support in the community, it's important that we provide it prior to the lottery so people know what's available, during the lottery so that they know how to apply, and then after the lottery, because once you get assigned, in order to get that seat, the parent has to accept, and many times people don't know that. So again, we're out in the communities wherever we need to be to assist families throughout this process.
I want to reiterate on that piece because it's important. Just because the parent hasn't responded doesn't mean we give that seat up within the 2 weeks. We usually go 3 weeks in that process. We make sure that that school has contacted and shows proof that that parent has been contacted, because not everyone has an email, not everyone has a phone, that we have a right phone number. We do not give that seat up until we have some sort of contact with that parent, because I think that would hurt us in the long run for the students that really need to be in our programs.
So how do we make decisions about our choice programs, and what are the driving forces behind that? So there are many of them. One happens to be taking a look at our local economy and the labor market. So looking at research studies like the one recently conducted by the BDB that was funded by JP Morgan, and to see what are the needs out there. Also, being in tune with our stakeholders, whether those stakeholders are students or parents, business and industry, whomever they may be. Back in September, we held a summit right here in the boardroom where we brought a collaboration of different people. We even had parents here because we want to be able to hear all of the various voices to help us make decisions. Transportation is also one of those areas that we consider when we're making decisions. We look at continuums and feeder patterns to make sure we're filling in gaps and we're not creating gaps. Always funding, and that kind of goes without saying. I think the previous workshop kind of alluded to that. And then also taking a look at the space and capacity of our schools, because sometimes we have the desire to put programs in schools, but do we really have the space and the capacity in the school to accommodate those programs? And then more importantly, what's becoming more and more of a challenge for our CTE teachers is finding teachers. We just retired 3 teachers, and between those 3 teachers, there was 100 years of experience. And so replacing those is always a challenge. And so those are some of the things that we look at in terms of decision making. Also, we take a look at legislation, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but there are 3 things that we're following right now that is impacting some of the decision making that we're doing around career and technical education in particular. One is the governor's executive order, Section 1, which is calling for a statewide audit of career and technical education programs across the state. We don't quite know what that's going to look like yet, but we're anticipating getting more technical assistance on that. And then House Bill 7071, we're following that in some of the sections on that will have some impact on what we do in career and tech ed. Most importantly, I want to point you to the bullet that talks about establishing the career and technical education pathway option, which is going to be an 18-credit graduation option now for students, and that is to take place starting this fall. Also, the last bullet, strengthening career and technical education for the 21st century, a fancy title for Perkins 5. That legislation is now in place. We're in a transition year, and part of that is going to call for a comprehensive local needs assessment as we write our grant coming up, paying close attention to special populations, and redefining some of the definitions that were in Perkins 4. So we'll come back later with some more detailed information as we get more technical assistance around some of this legislation. One of the other things that we pay attention to as we're making decisions is where the programs are. So thanks to Dr. Robinson, we've been working really closely with transportation, and this is really a cool thing that we're doing with them. We're making an interactive map. So this is just a snippet, because later on, once we finalize this system, we'll be able to share with you how it works. This is going to be an internal document or system that we use to help us be able to kind of map where all of our programs are within the transportation zones. So this shows our middle school medical academies, where they are throughout the district. The big blue line around it shows the choice transportation zone, and the red shows the attendance zone. So we're working to build this out and have this ready for us to be able to use as we're making decision in terms of where programs will go. Program standardization is another thing that we pay close attention to. So when it comes to our CTE programs and our IB programs and programs that are regulated by some third-party organization such as Cambridge, our curriculums are standardized. The state dictates to us what our CTE programs will look like in terms of the courses, the standards, the benchmarks, the teacher certifications. Also, they give us ideas around what certifications the students will also take. Something we brought on over the last couple of years is some standardization around STEM and STEAM programs and what they look like. We have a rubric. Julia Mate has done a fantastic job on working with that. So we are really trying to make sure that our new STEAM and STEM programs that come on board are following that matrix first, and then reaching back to some of the more veteran programs that have been around for a while prior to that rubric coming on board, and making sure that they are also following that same process. So there's also standardization around our Montessori program, dual language, and ISA. So even though you can't really see this from here, maybe you can see it a little closer there. This is always a question, too, around our medical academies in terms of the standardization here. So going back to what I said earlier, I'll get you a bigger copy, around CTE programs, the state tells us if you're offering, let's say, allied health assisting, then the courses are going to be the same regardless of where it's offered. Whether it's a choice program where we're bringing in out-of-boundary students, or it's in-house where it's only available for the students who are zoned for that school. You're going to take Health Science 1, you're going to take Health Science 2, and you're going to take that third Allied Health Assisting course. So sometimes we have some programs or strands of medical at one school that we may or may not have at another school, and that's where you may see some differences. A lot of times, the fluctuation in those strands comes into play. If we had a teacher one year who could teach 3 strands, that teacher leaves and goes back to industry. Now we hire someone and they can only teach 1. So that does have an impact. But Dr. Benavente is here, and he works diligently to try to make sure we're replacing those medical teachers as quickly as possible. We do have unique programs, and unique programs are those that they really are the only ones like that in town. And so when we look at where we could potentially grow, these are some of the first places that we also may pay attention to, and we look at the feasibility of being able to replicate these programs. When it comes to career and technical education, we're very strong in the district. We have over almost 50,000 students in grades 6 through 12 taking at least one CTE course. The demographics of those students mirror the demographics in terms of gender with the district, as well as demographics, as you can see from the charts here. When it comes to special populations taking CTE courses, again, we have some work to do because, in my opinion, the special populations here, ESE students, our teen parents, our homeless students, these are the students who really could take advantage of career and technical education, being able to walk out of the door and have employment, have certifications, and be able to sustain after graduation. We are succeeding in career and technical education. As you can see here, this slide shows over the past 4 years, this is secondary performance indicators from the state of Florida based on our Perkins data. So for the students who stick around with us and are concentrators in our program, meaning they have taken at least 3 courses within a single program, you can see our graduation rate among these students is at 98.69% for the 17-18 school year. We won't get 18, it's a lag year, so we won't get 18-19 data until next year this time. But you can see we are outperforming the state, and we even outperform the targets that we set with the state each year. So we're the red. That's our actual performance in terms of graduation rates for our CTE students. We couldn't do what we do without strong partnerships, and I want to emphasize that this is only a sampling. So we would have 50 slides if we tried to list all the people who help us do what we do, because we really truly could not do what we do without the support of the many businesses and organizations that support our schools. So whether they're coming into the schools as guest speakers, they're hosting our students for job shadowing, they're coming here to help our students with resume writing or mock interviews, whatever it is, we're very fortunate to have such a really strong support system when it comes to our partnerships. At the core of all of our CTE programs are soft skills, and I don't think I need to go too deep into this, but they are embedded in all of our curriculum frameworks. We're guided by programs of study. We're looking constantly to see where we can expand into new CTE programs, particularly as we try to expand in the PSAV area with our adult learners. We have articulation agreements. In fact, we met with Palm Beach State yesterday to work on our secondary to post-secondary articulation agreements. We're actually coming up with a brand new cosmetic look of the agreement to make it easier for students to understand. But we are articulating to make sure that students aren't repeating coursework that they've already learned while they were in the academies with us. We're leaders continually in industry certifications, and again, we're in the process now of schools entering their 18-19 data, but as of 17-18, you can see the top 10 certifications that were taken, and then the top certifications that were earned with the highest pass rates. Again, when you look at the needs of our industry out in the community, the certifications that our students are earning are in those areas. They're in the healthcare area, they're in the IT area, they're in the construction and drafting areas.
Breathe. So as we move, this is a slide that the state got to see, and we were able to present it, but this is an impressive slide. We are an outlier. We are an incredible outlier. We not only are half the size of Miami-Dade, but we are even with them, if not more than them, in industry certifications, which is really, this is why we get nationwide looks. What's more important about this data is in middle school level, there for the entire state of Florida, Palm Beach County is 30% of industry certifications earned in the middle school level, because we went all IT in every middle school a couple years ago. So everyone's trying to catch us, and we got to stay on top of our game. But this slide, if there's one slide that encapsulates what our students and teachers are doing on the front lines and amazing jobs in these schools, this is it, and it's an impressive slide. It puts us in just a different category as everyone else.
Okay. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about our fabulous IB programs. We have some of the best IB programs in the nation. I'm very proud to also announce today that last week we found out that one of our MSAP schools, Palmetto Elementary School, thanks to the work of Sandy Wesson and Tanya Johnson and the team for MSAP, they are now an IB World Authorized School. And so we look forward to having other schools that have been funded with our MSAP dollars to get that same authorization. One of the things I wanted to point out for IB, though, that some of you may or may not know, we have also something called the International Baccalaureate Career Program, which basically combines IB and a career academy together. And so last year, we haven't been doing that for too long, so we're starting to see some of those students get those certificates now. So last year, we had 78 students to get that International Baccalaureate Career Certificate. We continue. We just talked about the arts. We have fabulous art programs, and we have some ideas around some new things. Our JRTC programs are stellar. We've talked about our STEM and STEAM programs as well. So as we move forward, we are looking to see if we can do some interest surveys of our students, just to make sure that what we're offering is really what the students are interested in, but keeping that balance of student interest with the needs of industry and whether or not there's actually going to be employment and a career path out there for them. Another area that we're looking at is making our audition process, streamlining that so that it's clear as it can possibly be for parents, so that there's no misunderstandings about how the process is. We're building a section on our department website. We've been collaborating with our art schools, getting ideas, talking about some of the questions and challenges that we've had from parents. And then the other thing is also to building a site where anyone who might be interested and meets the qualifications to become an adjudicator, building that as well. We talked about expanding out on those interactive choice maps and finalizing that, and we'll be working throughout the summer to do that, and hopefully we'll have that finalized by the fall. And then looking again to expand in our CTE programs and conducting some program reviews. We had talked about program reviews last year, but we kind of held off on those program reviews because we knew, based on some of the language coming down from Perkins 5 and some of the things that we were hearing that were coming from Tallahassee, we wanted to make sure that we didn't put something in place and do a review and then had to go back and do something different based on the needs required of Perkins 5. We are in the process now of reviewing some recommendations that have been submitted from principals for programs for FY21, so we'll be bringing those recommendations and ideas back to you guys in the fall. So what are we missing, and what are your questions?
You really ready for that? Mrs. Whitfield, we'll start with you.
Thank you. All right, so I have been going through this whole going to middle school process. So I have everything's settled, we're fine. But I have had a lot of comments from people in the community about it. So I just want to talk to you about that briefly, and you can answer some publicly maybe. So first of all, middle school, for some reason, people don't like middle school. And I think it's the children, probably. They're terrified of the age. But I do think we need to do a better job of advertising our middle schools, because I can so easily convince a parent to go to an elementary school that's in our district and a high school that's in our district, really across the board. But when it gets to middle schools, everyone's terrified, and the only acceptable answer is like one, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we're messing up something there. And one of the ways that I think that would be helpful is tours, like physical on-site tours, because as a parent, when you take your kid out of that elementary happy everyone loves your child space, and then you move them over to middle school where it's terrifying and all that, actually walking through the classrooms and seeing the kids, I really think it makes a difference. So I don't know how we do that in a way that doesn't overwhelm our principals and our staff, but possibly with the choice coordinator position, even if they schedule it on some days. I've actually sent people to days that are supposed to be tour days, and it's kind of fallen apart on that day, where they felt like nobody was ready for them, or they weren't expecting people to come. So, I think I've seen it go well too, but I think that specifically going into middle school, you really have to coddle the parents a little bit so they feel comfortable. Yeah, it's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Okay, so there's that. The second thing, I had a fifth grader complain about this, and I thought this was interesting. When you do the audition process for all of our arts programs, they were thinking, and you can tell me why you do it this direction, but could they find out whether or not they passed the audition before they had to choose which school they wanted to go to, so that if they don't pass any auditions, they understand that, and then they don't have to
I'll address that.
apply?
That's been a historical practice. Doesn't make it right because it's historical. It makes it right because if the child tries out for multiple things and doesn't pass it, then they get other options, and they get ability to have more choices than anyone else did. So what it does, it'll crowd the system where people are trying out for everything, and it doesn't have any consequence to it. We have such a valued piece of a school center up in North Palm, and we know that as we're expanding that, but that would give an unfair advantage to students that would load up those and then still have the opportunities, multiple choices after that. So that is the key reason why that would be, because we'd accelerate from about 3,000 auditions to about 10,000 auditions with that.
Yeah, I can see that. That would make sense. So the other thing about the North Palm problem is that I think there's just a funding balance in some of our schools when we talk about foundations and the way that they are supported in some spaces and not supported in others. And it's hard, I think, for a parent, if you were to take the labels off of everything and just put how many resources your student is going to get at certain schools versus others. I think I think that is really an unfair thing to ask of our parents, is that I'm sorry you didn't win the golden lottery ticket to go to the school where you're going to get a bunch of community funds as well. And then I think some of our principals are really good at writing grants, trying not to name names of schools that have done well, but I think that, we have to be realistic as a school board, looking at what is really happening within these schools and how is that equitable, because, I really want our kids to want to go to our schools. I think we do a really, really good job of taking care of children when they're there, but it's hard for me to tell a parent, no, it's going to be fine to go to your home school when they desperately wanted to go to a choice program and they were going to get a bunch more resources there. So I don't know how we fix this, but I do think that there has to be some sort of way for us to at least acknowledge those differences within schools, because it just doesn't seem like a fair conversation to be having. And then obviously, I really think it comes down to a lot of advertising at schools. When we do have something special at a school, and that school may not be the one that everyone thinks of as like a great school, we have to find a way to advertise it. I love your videos. I think that's been a really cool thing that you've done to put the word out and let people know about that. But I really think we have to do something. Like, I noticed you're going into the communities that haven't been reached so much, which is awesome, and obviously we need to do that. But I think we also have to go out into the communities that are traditionally applying to the same school over and over and over again because their best friend went there and they have to go. And I want to show them that we have really good programs other places too. Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and I really do enjoy working with you with the choice programs. I think you are cut above all of the other districts. But just a few little pointers, and maybe you already have this going on and I don't know anything about it. Everybody on that day when they get selected for the choice, everybody's excited once they're selected. But what about the students that don't get picked up? Do you have a way to communicate with some of those parents immediately? I don't know if you have something by technology where they can click in, where there's some counseling notes, some people to call, because sometimes they may not have been selected and they may be on the wait list and they need to know what that means to be on the wait list. Maybe they weren't selected at all, so then they begin to call maybe a board member or dial your phone and may not get anybody. But is there a way to kind of look at that pool of parents who are in a desperate manner? They tried so hard to get into Bach or some of these other places.
So we do have that measurement. We have a separate email box that when they get that notification, it says you can have any questions, and we man it for the first couple weekends, 24 hours a day almost, because parents want to know right away. So we are working on Saturdays and Sundays to make sure they get that. We also let them know some programs that are open still that would take a late application, and they would be able to be they would qualify for, even get transportation. So we do have that backup. We'd like to do a little bit more, but immediately once they get that notification that they didn't get in, they have an opportunity to email us back directly with any questions, but we also show them that there's other programs they can apply for that have still no waiting list, and a late application would be accepted for that program as well.
Thank you, and I know that you do that. I just get some of the fallback on some of those. Also, another piece of that would be some of the schools, such as Santa Lucia's has a wonderful law enforcement police program, and we have one at Glade Central. So when you're looking at some of the ones that are really heavy duty with a lot of support from the community and from police and everybody else working with these children, how do you make sure that others get a chance to get it? Because some of them are at a different level than others. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
They're
Right.
much greater in.
Right, and some of our criminal justice in particular, we do have some outside organizations that have come in and partnered with us, so you may see some additional support in those areas, and so we're looking at how we can garner additional support for the schools that don't currently have those. Some of the organizations support us even with providing us with police officers as instructors, so that's saving us some money there in terms of teachers. But that's definitely an area that we can take a look at. In terms of access, like at Santa Lucia's, their program is an in-house program, so they're only taking in students who are zoned for that school. And so when we go back and take a look at the decision-making and the driving forces, part of being in-house versus choice also has to do with the capacity of the school. So if a school has multiple programs, sometimes when the program comes on board, they may leave the program as in-house because they don't have the capacity to bring in any additional out-of-boundary students. And that can fluctuate back and forth. So 5 years ago, maybe they were choice, and now 5 years, there's been a lot of growth in the area, so now they have chosen to make that program in-house because they're no longer getting very many, if any, out-of-boundary seats. So we do pay attention to that, but that's something we can take a closer look at in terms of the support.
Dr. Robinson?
Okay, so thank you. We've come a long way, huh? So let me start off by saying I know you guys think that I harass you and all that kind of stuff, okay? So you are good, right? We have a very, very, very good choice and career program. I want to make this thing outstanding, and I want to make it equitable, right? I continue to say, and it's through no fault of yours, and I don't really know how to fix this, but the choice program continues by virtue of the process to discriminate against children who don't have a caring adult in their life who's paying attention to the fact that they need to fill out an application 8 months before school starts and possibly audition, which would make it 9 months. And so that part is what it is. I don't know what the fix is there, but I just know that all children are not able to take advantage of our greatness here. Yeah. And that is what gives me heartburn. So I have a number of things. I do appreciate you attempting to address all the issues that I sent to you in email, right? My intent in requesting this workshop is I want the board to see, I want all of the board members, each of the board members to see what I see in terms of the holes in the choice program, right? And where there's room for improvement, because some of that room for improvement is going to be a budgetary allocation, which is clearly, what we vote on, right? So I just want to mention a few things. So one, you mentioned the survey. And I think that is something Dr. Licata and I spoke about. And so I would hope that we would get follow-up on that survey before it goes out to the students. And maybe to the parents. That's room for development, right? Mm-hmm. So transportation, we have got to have a follow-up workshop, and we've got to show the board and the public that outstanding GIS or whatever that thing is called with the drive. Oh my, that thing is just so awesome. But the purpose of that is, again, to see the holes. I know you guys know. I've talked to you until you understood what I was saying, right? But this is the thing, because if we don't provide transportation, we are effectively denying access to the program, right? And so transportation is a key. Okay, Mrs. Paul left. But Mrs. Paul did say, and I'm gonna put it on the public record, that she was looking at offering like smaller transportation options for the programs that and locations that would have fewer kids, that we don't have to send a huge school bus, but the child will still have access. Because I think that that's part of the fix. So we had to balance the cost of adding a new school bus stop and with adding a new program, which then adds to the complication when you have the singleton, or when you have a program that's dependent on that one outstanding teacher who is holding that program together and making it all superlative, right? So, if it's that kind of situation, it seems to me we need to figure out how to add some additional bus stops or provide more transportation. But, and those are the kind of details that I know you guys know, but in these presentations, you make it seem kind of simple, and it's not, right? No, I know. I know it's not, but I'm just hoping everybody else up here starts to grasp the complexity of this thing, because until we get the complexity, then we cannot make it just truly, truly, truly outstanding.
Dr. Robinson, if I could interrupt you, I just want to thank you for that statement, because one of the things that makes those demographics that we showed earlier is because we spend millions of dollars in transportation, and it doesn't happen that way without that. and we do have those holes, and that's what we're working on. But I even believe that Dr. Fenoy, when he arrived, couldn't believe that we provided transportation to so many choice programs. But it doesn't happen unless we provide that transportation. We know that. So that push by you to get that thing by Jerry and Shane from transportation, which is awesome, we're going to continue working on that. But that is a credit to why we have such great demographics.
And I want the board, I think the board understands it, but, and Peter's right, when I first got here, we are one of the few districts in the country to provide this much transportation for kids, like literally. In the districts that I worked in, you would have, every parent has to get into a Walmart parking lot at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then they get on buses for 2 hours. We've done a Herculean task. But there, to your point, Dr. Robinson, there are large budgetary complications associated, because at this point, we can't pull it back. And so with trains and buses, we're basically planes, trains, and automobiles at this point when it comes to transportation.
Exactly. So I just want to continue here. So I don't think this presentation has adequately explained to the board the comparisons of programs, right? So I get when it's a CTE program, if it's IB, one of the things that really gave me great assurance as a parent when my son was in the IB program is that this was like internationally standardized. So I was pretty clear that what level of rigor he was getting. And so, but I don't think that we had that kind of, and I know you try, but we do not have that standardization in the rigor across all programs with similar names. And then, of course, is the issue of the names, right? Is it a STEM or MST and all this other stuff, which needs to get cleaned up. I mean, we just need to get that cleaned up in order to communicate to our customers what this thing is, right? I think that the teacher's credentials is some variability there. I'm not saying all this needs to be like laid out in public, but I think it's part of the analysis that you must do and share with us as individual board members at a bare minimum. The whole issue of this converting to a choice program that had students from outer boundaries to now just being an in-house program, I think is something we have to put a halt to that. We have to figure out how we balance that. Now, if we're going to have a program that is in-house, then where is that program over here? So I'm going to talk about the equine or pre-vet or whatever it is, right? Okay, because my children do not have access to that. Some of my babies want to be veterinarians, okay? And they don't have access to that. And so we just have to get real with that. I mean, I understand that we will probably never get to the point that I want us to, but I need to see us moving, forward with addressing these issues. Now, the other thing is that, and I've got a few more. Hang on for me, Ms. Andrews. Okay, so the whole definition of success, right? We have not yet really clearly defined how we look at success. So for me, I wanted to look at PYG for subgroups by program by school, right? So I think that gave Mr. Howard some heartburn. So, but I think we need to have a conversation with Mr. Howard and his team about how do we statistically measure success. We know one of the measures of success is whether or not children apply for the program, right? We know that. And then the percent who successfully complete. So let me talk about these industry certifications. So you presented us with data on participants, right? The disaggregation of the participants. You did not provide us with data, with disaggregated data on those who earn their certification, right?
No, that's in there. The IC, those are earned.
I didn't see that. Okay, so
Well,
if I overlooked it,
Are you talking about participating and passing?
I'm
rates?
sorry?
Passage rates? Is that,
By race.
Okay, just tell me what
Or by
slide it is.
demographics?
I will admit that I see graduation.
No, those are,
there's one in there that shows the top 10 in terms of the top 10 that earned and had highest pass rates?
Okay.
and
I'll go back and
those
look
numbers, even that special chart is all that is what is earned. Remember, we're operating right about the state average of 78%, 77% for passing. So those earned is 77% of the total group that has passed.
Okay, I'll look through it again. So the other thing is, So in your outreach, I think you got some fabulous outreach, and that QR code thing, that's just like awesome. I love that, right? But in your list, I don't see anything where you're outreaching to the African American community. Did I miss that too? I'd be happy to have missed it.
Well, we do. We're everywhere. So we're at all the schools.
No. Targeted.
Targeted.
So
Community
I'm
centers,
clear. We need to go
libraries.
to the Haitian churches, for example. You
Oh,
have
yeah.
them
Yeah, we do.
listed,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm talking about specific outreach to the Black community.
Gotcha.
Okay? All right. So now, the other thing is I want to talk about these arts programs without auditions, because come to learn that some of them exist, right? And just, I think maybe compare and contrast access. I'm just talking about access to this, because I think if children go to programs they're interested in, they're going to be more engaged in whatever definition of success you have, they're more likely to be successful. So, I want to talk about blind auditions, right? I didn't hear that mentioned.
Well, that's part of the conversations we're having with schools around the auditions and the adjudicators. So we have had very extensive conversations about the pros and cons for that, for doing blind auditions.
Okay.
I just
so,
didn't say it today.
So just so the board knows, I don't know about the rest of you. Every year I get numerous phone calls from parents who feel that their children were, scored low, right? Many of them who had so we're going to talk about our schools, had their own private lessons beforehand, blah, 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 right? All that. And so at least to minimize the perception of bias, I think that we need to push to blind auditions in the art areas that you could do blind auditions in, right? And so I'm kind of tired of trying to make everybody happy and all that kind of stuff. I mean, this is good for kids, right? And I don't see how it's bad for the adults, except for the adults who want to keep certain people out. I don't see it any other way. Now, the issue of the adjudicators, so I was initially told adjudicators needed to be teachers, and then I saw in a purchasing report where we paid people who were not teachers to be adjudicators. So people are reporting things to you that are not true, okay?
No, adjudicators have never all been teachers. They're community. They could be community instructors, but they could be qualified through their arts, and that is established. They could be artists and residents. A majority are teachers, though. That is correct.
Okay.
But there
then
are.
I'm going to conclude that I imagined that, and I'll check with the other people that were in the room when I was told that. Okay. So now let's move on. So, but what I do need you to check, though, is this issue of people who teach at private art academies being adjudicators.
We've had that discussion as well, and we have a form that adjudicators have to sign where if they are an adjudicator and a student comes before them that they have done private lessons or singers of the Palm Beaches or whatever they've had, church choir, that they will recuse themselves, and that's part of a form that the adjudicators sign off on. So we've addressed that in our meetings around the adjudicators.
Okay, I'm just going to ask that we figure out something a little bit stronger, like maybe the principal signs off. I'm just suggesting that because, I just had the report 2 days ago about reportedly the one school, all of their kids magically get in. They pass audition and get the golden ticket through the lottery. Okay. And just the singleton programs, if we can address those. I know you guys are working hard. I know you have done good work. I just want all of our children to benefit from it. Oh, and then a follow-up on the behavioral health academies. We talked about that. We talked about building our own
We
school
talked about
psychologists.
that too since the last time we talked, yes.
If you could just maybe give us a memo that says where we are with that. And then, so the last, two more things. And this is something that cannot be answered immediately. How do we use our analysis of choice programs to improve the schools that children are not choosing? Okay? We have schools that have multiple choice programs, in fact, The children are not choosing, right? So it's not working. So how do we use that data? And when we get to whatever Mr. Howard's statistical measures of success would be, how do we use that to improve what we're doing? Because right now, we're just continuing to add on.
Right.
Somewhere along the line, I think we probably need to stop doing something. I'm not sure what that something is, right? But if it's not meeting our definition of success, that we need to come to some common agreement what that is, then we need to reevaluate the school's program, okay? And then the last thing, and this I've brought up before, should we give priority to students who have formerly been low performing in terms of getting into a choice program? And I think that's something that the board needs to have a conversation around. But I think it's something that we should consider, because if you say engagement is part of the answer, and if I'm into STEM, or that's fascinating to me, but I haven't been living up to my own abilities yet, and you get me in a STEM program, now you can entice me to reach higher.
So when we did the research to try to look to see what other districts were using for entry criteria and those kinds of things, we ran across in Orange County, they actually looked to see whether or not the student can accommodate the magnet-themed courses within their schedule as part of the entry criteria. So right now, we don't do that. So if a student applies and they happen to be level 1 or level 2, when they get to the school, sometimes they may or may not be scheduled right away in those choice classes, but we do everything we can to bring those students up to the academic level so that they do have the room in their schedule to be able to schedule them. So sometimes it's because we are up against other requirements in the student schedule that we kind of have to battle whether we can get the kids into the programs or not.
In the high school, the
courses.
7th period day makes it easier. So many of our kids, the CTE programs, are in those programs already. Middle school gets more challenging if they
Yeah.
are required to take other remedial courses on that 6th period day.
And if a child is selected into a program and they're level 1 and 2 and their schedule doesn't permit them to go in a middle school, be able to attend that program right away, none of the principals are allowed to return that child right then and there. Absolutely not. They stay at that school, and we try and work to make sure they get back into that program. So that would make it a requirement, and we do not do that. If they are a level 1 student and they're still in their remediation, the principal knows that that student stays at that school, and we try and work through it so they can get into that academy while they're there.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. I'd just like to share with you, I love the Megatronics program out at West Tech. That's awesome. It's at the middle school and high school level, and it's really, truly making a difference, as well as the Construction Academy. So you're doing some great things, but I wanted to ask you about one other place that I've been looking at since I've been on this school board, and I've been asking about it. And I know that you may say, well, how can we do it? How can we get that kitchen up and running at Turning Points? We got that wonderful building there, and it probably has to be scaled back. I don't want somebody to start a fire or have a knife or anything like that, but I know we can do some kind of program at a lower level scale with some of the top students at the program at Turning Points, and then eventually gradually work them up. That's a wonderful facility that we spent all that money on, and it's still sitting there. So I would like for us to look at that. And I wonder, what do we do with some of the alternative schools? I mean, these would have to be in-house programs, but I think when students have problems at their traditional school, if they can go to one of the alternative schools and pick up something from choice, a teacher there that could do that, when you say what the next steps are, I'd like to see some of that going on. As I've gone to Crossroads, they do some neat things out there, and it's just with all of the teachers there, but there may be a way that we might be able to do something with choice out there, you know, and so we got to look at those kids too, as well as the ESE and ELL students. There should be a way that even at their home school, they could get some priorities to some of these programs. And maybe we're already doing that, so just help me. I know you're doing a lot of things.
Well, Ms. Andrews, I have to say to you, when we were going through this presentation, and we all know that there's definitely opportunity for growth. And as we were going through the data and we saw the statistics with our ESC students and our ELL students, we knew right away that we were failing our students. So we're definitely going into a corrective action mode in regards to the next time we go through this, how can we make certain that we are indeed making sure that those students are inclusive, and not say that they are not going to be successful, but what mechanism and things that we can put in place to give them the opportunity, the same opportunity, because they are in the Exceptional Student Education Program for a reason. And we need to look at our ELL students as well in regards to the challenges, or if they're not applying, why are they not applying? And if they have applied and been dismissed because they're not performing academically or what have you, then what is it that we can do to assist their academia needs? So I do want to assure the board that it's definitely a corrective action piece that we're going to be looking at, because we're not pleased when we look at the data for those two subgroups.
Right,
And
and
the
if I can tag-
alternative ed students.
Yeah, and if I can tag
Absolutely.
on to that, part of it is also, not that they're not getting assigned, but you have to apply to get assigned. And so that is one of, I think someone mentioned it earlier about more intensive marketing. And if one of my specialists was here, he would like to see us be able to have every school at the showcase, but financially, we're not there yet, because sometimes students and parents don't know what they have at their home school. And so sometimes people are chasing to go to another school because of what they've heard and all these things, but don't even realize they have wonderful programs just like that or comparable to that, that can meet the needs of the students right in their zone school. So marketing is definitely one of the things that we know that we've got to do a much better job at.
Ms. Whitfield and Ms. Brew.
Just really super brief. One of the things that we've been talking about was a high school for the conservatory school. Is that something you guys are still on your future plans thinking about?
We are working with leadership and having those conversations. So when we come back to the table to look at what we're doing for FY21, that definitely will be a part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Brew.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. We have come a long way. I remember the days when we actually asked on the application if a student had a disability. So we've come light years ahead. So I do have a couple of suggestions on that, and then I have another comment. But for the ESC students, to increase the participation, I know we do transition IEP meetings at the end of the year, and I see Mr. McCormick sitting here. Maybe what we need to do is in that last year of elementary school, maybe earlier in the year, have an IEP meeting where the parents are presented with what the options are, or make sure that we communicate it through IEP meetings. Transition IEPs happen too late for them to go in the application process, so maybe it's in 4th grade that we start presenting that information to them. And the same thing
Great
with our
idea.
English language learners is when reaching out to the families, it's really just going to be presenting them those options, because I do know in the past, like, a lot of and even today when our ESC parents call me, they don't even realize their children can go into those programs. They're just so grateful their child is getting educated in the regular classroom that they're almost afraid to ask for it. So that's my first piece. The other piece is that, and forgive me, I have feeder patterns on the brain, because what I've learned recently is that when we closed Odyssey, a lot of our students that are up in like Woodlands, they're not going to go to high school with their classmates. It's just we're all over the place. So the question I have is, with these programs that we have, and especially the unique ones, do most of them have a feeder pattern so that if a student in middle school does get exposed to, let's say, the graphic design at Congress, do they have a place they can go, or are we still kind of all separate
There's a
entities?
good pattern of feeder patterns, but some of those singletons provide that difficulty, especially if it only starts in high school. We do have some like programs that they transfer through and go through, but one of our biggest holes was IB, because in the north end and in the central we didn't have that elementary and middle and high. We've closed that with the MSAP grant, but now that we have that tool that Dr. Robinson has talked about, we're going to be able to see those feeder patterns, because it's going to pull up by program, and transportation, and make sure every kid has one or two options if it's not at their school. So that's even going to close the gap even more.
Just as a quick follow-up, when we're looking at that new middle school that we're going to be building, which that's not on our schedule yet, but also the high school,
Already?
I would hope that we would look at what those choice programs are around those schools so that we can make sure, because we don't have any high schools out west. So you know that we need, Ms. Andrews and I need as many schools out there that have programs that feed into them. And the same thing with the middle schools, making sure those middle school students are able to continue on their track.
Larry Clausen has met with the team a couple times. We talked about and if you looked at the one chart, what are the high numbers? And those are the numbers that we needed. And when you look at your area, all the middle schools have medical, but you can't get into Park Vista if you're not zoned for it. So medical, obviously, the highest need or highest want, and then the technology right behind it. So that's what's going to definitely be there. So we've been working on that, meeting with them, because that'll help solve some of that issue that we talked about, especially with Santa Lucis and the criminal justice, with kids being in-house now since there's no seats. So that'll relieve us a little bit, but he doesn't want to jump on that too much because it's going to be crowded as soon as we open it.
Yep, and we're also looking at the schools that are going to be impacted by the opening of the new high school and what programs they have, because if students now can't go to, I'll use John I. Leonard as an example, they have an ISA program or whatever. So we're looking at the programs that are at the schools that are going to be impacted by the opening of the new school and seeing what we're able to duplicate or replicate at the new school so that students don't lose out.
So I have a couple questions. So can you, with respect to feeder patterns, can you provide, not quickly, because I know it's going to be a little bit of work, can you provide the board with, for example, we want to see all the academy programs that are in the elementary schools and what those feed into. If there's none in a certain elementary school, then go to the middle school in that area and show us where the middle school feeds into so we can actually see on paper rather than clicking on a map to try and figure out what the feeder patterns are. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see, for example, where Boca L would feed into with respect to whatever programs we have at Boca L or at Calusa or the schools in my district. I'd like to see where those elementary schools would go next, because lots of times parents ask us, if I put my kid here, will they have someplace, and I don't know the answers to that, and then it's hard to find it. And maybe the program you're working on that Dr. Robinson is suggesting will do that, but in the meantime, can you just get us in paper?
So that would be a lot of pieces of paper, but one of the things that we have a team, and they're not here tonight either, working on is something very similar to an electronic version of that we could possibly publish. It's through Power BI, so you can click on an elementary school and see what the feeder patterns are, and you can see the middle school and the high school that the school naturally feeds into, and it will list the programs at the elementary, at the middle, and at the high school. So in lieu of, because you would have a stack like this of papers to kind of try to comb through, and I think if we're trying to show parents that information, it may be a little bit too cumbersome for parents, but if we can create something electronically that a parent could go on, like Find My Bus Stop or something like that, where they can see Find My Feeder Pattern, they could click on it and see what programs based on the natural feeder pattern,
okay.
going from Boca L to Boca Middle to Boca High, what the programs are there.
Okay, thank you. And the other issue, it's something you all covered earlier, when you have some programs that there's prerequisites, so the kids know whether or not they can get in, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't understand why we don't do that with auditions, because a student, if they're not talented enough to get in past the audition, then they're forfeiting their chance to have two choices. So my personal view is, since you have prerequisites for some of the other academies, one of the prerequisites to get into Dreyfus, for example, is you have to be able to sing if you're going to go into the vocal. So the child should know in advance whether or not they have the talent to get into that school. And if they don't have the talent because they don't go through the audition, then they still have two choices left, just like all the other kids that have prerequisites. They know their grades aren't good enough to get into the medical academy, so they're not going to apply to the medical academy. If their talent isn't good enough to get them into a performing arts academy, then they can apply to something else, because that way the child goes into something that maybe they're not talented for, but they have an interest in. And we found out that the kids that go into something they have an interest in, their graduation rate is 98% because they make it all the way through. Because lots of times these kids think they're going to get into Dreyfus or Bach and they don't get in, and now they have one choice left, but that's their second choice. So I don't know how that factors in to all the people that put that school down as first choice, because this kid put it down as their second choice. So they're behind the eight ball on that one. So I think we need to fix that so that these kids know in advance if they qualify for Dreyfus or Bach or West Boca Performing Arts or whatever schools have the audition.
And that does present a problem, but the little caveat to that is the prerequisites are advertised, and you can compare what you have through your SIS, the students at home, and know their GPA if they qualify for it. So there are some things, and they've had to take this course. So they do have some knowledge that if they got a 2.0 and they're going in for MSc that requires Algebra 2 honors before you go into freshman year, you're not going to make it. So that is there, but I still see your point, and it's a very good point. Like I said, just because it's historically done doesn't mean it's right. So I agree with your saying, we all do, and we're trying to figure that out, how we can make sure there's more
Well, you
opportunities.
guys are very talented. We probably have the best CT program in the United States, and I'm hoping that when we have to comply with the new governor's directive on telling them about our CT programs, I hope we brag about the fact that we are probably the leader in the state of Florida, if not the nation, so that when he talks about choice, he knows that Palm Beach County has got the right choices already, and we can stop with this crap that goes on up there with respect that we don't offer enough choices. Excuse my vernacular on that one, but you get the point, and I'm
Strike that
tired.
from the record.
And if there's no more questions, we'll end this one. Thank you very much. You guys do a great job.